This is our 13th lecture in Intro to Mobile Development. We are going to take a quick look at the answers for quiz number, I believe this is quiz number 4, sorry. Okay, only 5 questions, so this should be pretty quick. Preferences. If you want to support multiple languages in your app, it's a good idea to have a button on the home screen that says Preferences, then allow the user to change a language. The answer to this one is false. We are encouraged to kind of give a low priority to having preferences within our app. We would rather use preferences that are part of the phone. So this is especially true if the phone already has a preference set up. And this is an example. You already set your language preference within the phone itself, so it's redundant to have yet another preferences button in your app that also sets the language. Better to use the language which is set at the phone level instead of duplicating it. Duplicating it leads to confusion to the user. Also, it's just redundant, and we don't want to duplicate anything we don't have to, because we want to keep things simple. Okay. You have an app that allows users to rate and review restaurants. You use GPS from the phone to determine where the user is and produce a list of restaurants near the user. How should the user ratings be set? Choose all that apply. If you're using GPS for any purpose, you really should not set it to everyone. It should be low maturity or higher. So low, medium, high maturity, all of those count for using GPS. Okay. You have an app for online poker. The maturity setting should be medium or high maturity. Okay. Match the best practice with the reason for using the best practice. There should be a one-on-one. So use a background thread, increase performance and responsiveness. There are certain tasks that should be done in the background, like synchronizing data. The alternative to having them in the background is having them on the user interface thread, or the user interface process. And if you do it there, then it will slow down the user interface, because the user interface might have to wait for this background process to finish, which is very inefficient. So using background threads increases performance and responsiveness, because the user interface is more focused on doing user interface tasks and less focused on things like synchronizing over a network, persisting to a file storage mechanism, or something like that. Autocomplete. Simplify. Suggest the next course of action, but allow the user to make the final call. We know that's a big principle of mobile design, is that number 1, we should simplify. Number 2, we should make recommendations. But then number 3, we should let the user make the final decision. Autocomplete is a perfect example of this. So we can make suggestions, hopefully based on local data, but then we can still allow the user to type in whatever he or she wants at the end of the day. Okay. Disable the GPS when not in use. So in other words, when we send the screen to the background, or when we pause the application, we should also disable GPS. That will conserve battery life, which is important. GPS is free, so it's not going to cost us any data if we're using satellite-based GPS as opposed to cell tower triangulation. So GPS is free, so it's not going to cost us anything, but it's going to eat up a lot of battery life. As a matter of fact, when I go out and I GPS plants, I usually take a backup battery with me that has a tremendous reserve, because GPS does take quite a bit of power out of a mobile device. So I did mention satellite-based GPS and cell tower triangulation. Quick note on the differences between the two. Satellite GPS is free, and it can tell it can tell things like where you're going, what direction you're going. The only trick is that it can take some time to acquire a satellite signal, especially if you've changed your location fairly dramatically. What the phone will typically do is it will cache or remember the most recent satellites that it has used, and then the next time you go for GPS, it will try to access those same satellites again. There are times I've been on a cruise ship, and as we go to a port, I will go to a botanical garden and one of GPS plants. And typically on a cruise ship tour, you get maybe 10 minutes in a botanical garden. So 10 minutes and 200 plants. Every minute is precious. I would find as the ship would go port to port that it oftentimes my phone would still be on the last port. It would still have the GPS satellites from the previous port, and it would take a long time to resync. So as soon as we were coming into a port, I would quickly refresh my phone and try to get it to acquire a new satellite. The other option, which is a bit quicker to access but may or may not cost, is cell tower triangulation. That's how they can do things like track stolen phones, and also that's how your traffic speed is monitored. The mobile companies use cell phone triangulation to figure out how fast traffic is going on roadways, and then they can sell that to things like Google Maps and stuff like that, and sat navs and things like that. So the cell tower triangulation is a bit faster, but you have to be on your cellular network, and it may or may not cost money. Okay, do not duplicate the back button of the screen. Show only controls needed. So we have very small, very precious screen real estate. We have to make sure that we make the best of it. So we shouldn't put any superfluous buttons on the screen. Okay. Okay. When creating an app, use all permissions to request every possible permission that your app might use. That way you don't risk your app crashing because it does not have proper permissions. This is false. You should always try to use or request the absolute minimum permissions that you need. You want to request all of them, but you do want to request the minimum. You don't want to be aggressive. When a user is going to download or purchase your app, typically the user is going to see the permissions that your app is requesting, so you want to keep those to a minimum. So those are our 5 questions. I'm going to go ahead and post this. After that, our next recording is going to talk about application development layers, how we write applications, and also we'll have a little bit of time to play around with image editing. So I will see you in the next recording. Thank you.